very much for joining us on the show today, Nick. As I mentioned before we click record, for people that may or may not know who you are, a little bit about your story, your journey, tell us a little bit about who you are, my friend.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much for having me on this, Charles. It's good to talk and share my story. So, listen, I won't give you the full pitch. I've been in recruitment nearly over 25 years now. So I started the Barton Partnership in 2007. Prior to that, I was director at another search firm called Ashbury Marsden. Prior to that, I worked at another recruitment business called Fusion that focused on the fashion and lifestyle industry. Listen, my background is quite simple. I didn't go to university. I was packing boxes in a warehouse. I then decided I wanted to study osteopathy. While I was studying osteopathy, that was a part-time course. I was still working full-time for this fashion company in the warehouse. Got promoted very quickly at this company. I was working with a bunch of idiots, so that helped, and got into the head office. And then decided actually I was quite interested in the industry from a business perspective in the fashion industry. My family background's all in the rag trade, as they call it. And so decided actually I'm not going to pursue the osteopathy route, stop that, and carried on working for this fashion company in the head office. And then went to work for other fashion companies like French Connection and Nick Alfari, and again in head office positions. But then decided actually I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't for me. Someone said to me, we've thought about recruitment, can't shut you up. And, you obviously, you're quite interpersonal. So why don't you have a look at that? And went to join I applied to this fashion recruitment company that was looking for people that had no recruitment experience, but understood the fashion industry. And so, well, listen, I'll give it a go. Went for the interviews, got the job. And that was it, found my thing, recruitment for me has just been something that really has got me going now for the last 25 odd years. And so they taught me how to recruit. I knew the industry, and it worked well for a couple of years. And then realized that actually, the fashion industry isn't high paying, and I was quite ambitious. And so, but what was important for me, and this we'll probably touch upon this later on, was recruiting in an area that I could buy into and could develop an empathy with. And obviously, having grown up in the industry, having worked in the fashion industry, obviously I was very passionate about it, but it wasn't a high paying industry. Someone that could work 50 years or so would be earning 50, 60K, which, to a certain extent is not a small amount of money, but when you're working in that amount of time, it's not large either. And so, and also the fashion industry is very cyclical. One bad season can impact the whole industry. And so I interviewed for a bunch of city recruitment businesses and came across Ashbury Marsden. And what appealed to me about Ashbury Marsden was the founder, Paul Marsden, was just someone I immediately bought into, very entrepreneurial, very commercially minded, and someone I thought I could learn from. But also he wanted to launch this new area called strategy, which this was around 99, 2000, so just around when the dot-com bubble was about to burst. And they were based in the same building as Bain & Co. And we had McKinsey down the road and Boston Consulting Group just around the corner. And this, became my world. And I joined him and, this was in the good old days of spray and pray. But, we bought a commerce and industry database. We got a hold of a chap at Bain that was looking to leave. We sent his CV out to 60,000 contacts and, we had a tremendous response back. And that really led to the birth of what became the commerce and industry practice at Ashbury Marsden, which really focused on strategy as a subject area. And that was really where it started for me, my real journey, as I call it. And so, for 7 years, built up that strategy recruitment practice. We were the largest provider of strategic talent to industry. We built strategy teams for Tesco, Diageo, Coca-Cola, Walt Disney. And we really were, the market leader in that regard. And then in 2007, Paul sold the business through an MBO. I was a director and a stakeholder in the business, but I left with Paul, so I didn't roll in with the new leadership team, the new management team. I left with Paul, took my stake out, and this was in 2007. And what that gave me was the opportunity and the affordability to start my own company, and that was always my ambition. Yeah. So with that financial security that I had, I was able to launch the Barton Partnership in around July. I don't actually have an official date. But, I would say that the time I started picking up the phone, I moved into an office in Greville Street. I thought it was important that I got an office straight away and didn't just do it from home. I needed that commute to switch into sort of professional mode, as it were. And so really sort of started working around June, July 2007 to start building the Barton Partnership to where we are today. And I mean, unfortunately, I had more hair in those days, but today, 18 years on, we're just over 100 people now across what I call 3 head offices globally. So London, New York, and Singapore, which gives us the US, Europe, and APAC. We've just opened up an office in Sydney. We've got a presence in Paris as well. But our three head offices in New York, Singapore, and London, and just over 100 people now, and again very niche and very focused, and that's that I guess is, and again we'll talk about this I'm sure in terms of the secret to success, but having kept it very niche and focused around strategy, we've really built up that brand now and that global presence to where it is today, which is great. And then January of 2025, I stepped back from CEO and stepped up a chap called Ollie Phoenix, who's been with me 12, 13 years now, to now run the business. And he's been doing a great job with that, and with himself and the leadership team, to really start to accelerate the growth of the business over the next few years.
Awesome. What a journey. I mean, like you said, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it, because it sounds awesome. It's always, for me, from a selfish point of view, and I think for the listeners as well, listening to someone that's been on this journey, there's going to be so many wicked takeaways. But there's one thing that you mentioned there that really resonates with me personally, and I think will resonate with a lot of the listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
When my first ever job in recruitment, we did temporary social working recruitment.
Yeah.
And after a couple of months, I just... Not that I didn't buy into social workers, I think they have an important role and whatnot, but I didn't really get that passion for the industry, like you mentioned about when you first got into recruitment. And I really wanted to keep doing my apprenticeship, and spoke to the apprenticeship company, and they said, well, remember you interviewed with this other company, but it's £600 a month, and they do nursing recruitment. Yeah. And you probably don't know too much about my story. I won't go into it, but I was in and out of hospital with my mum. She's a cancer survivor, both grandparents in and out of hospital. So right. The thought of recruiting nurses and getting them more money because it was temporary, I was like, wow, if I can do that, that's like, for me, that's a big passion. I've always been in hospitals. I'm very passionate. I wanted to be a surgeon when I was younger. I was just not bright enough to do well in science, unfortunately. So when I got into nursing and built that desk up from scratch, it didn't matter how many hours I've worked, because I was so passionate about it, Nick, that when I was going into hospitals and putting my business cards on the ward administration desk and speaking to nurses and saying, like, I can get you extra work and give you double the money and stuff, I was just so passionate. And when I moved over to medical technology, I was now recruiting the salespeople to sell hospital beds and endoscopes and going into surgeries. And I would go in with the reps to go and meet their customers with them and go and just be fully immersed in the market. So I think, this will be some of the like you said, the secret sources to success. But I think for people listening to this, if you are working in a market or, you're building a division within your business and you're not necessarily that passionate about it, I think you're going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, for me, and again, I can only really talk about my experience, but I think it is, pertinent and relevant to any sales industry, that you've got to be bought into the product.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have that empathetic understanding and a connection with what you're doing. You've got to be proud, energized. When I was interviewing, when I left the fashion company, I was leaving the fashion recruitment company. I interviewed at a lot of recruitment businesses, and got offers from banking recruiters, IT recruiters, accounting recruiters,
mm-hmm.
and all great companies, and I'm sure I would have done well there, but I couldn't connect with the product, right? And for me, that was really important. What drew me into strategy as an area is that I'd be working and placing people that have a fundamental impact on people's day to day. Strategy within an organization is the team that works with the senior leadership, with the board, with the CEO, to define what that organization does, for good or bad. In a negative market, it'll be the strategy team that helps to understand, okay, well, what are our options? Do we need to downside? Do we need to make redundancies? Do we need to cut? In a positive market, how do we grow? Mm-hmm. And so what's very cool about my market is, when you read the paper and you read about an organization doing something, 9 times out of 10, that would have originated from a strategy that's been developed by a team that we've recruited for. And that's really cool. And I really like that, right? And then moreover, the people that we are working with and placing are future business leaders. Again, if you look at the board of the majority of the FTSE 100, there are individuals there that would have started life within a consulting environment.
Mhm.
And so again, working with people at that level who are actually really down to earth. And some of my best friends now are, candidates, clients, etc., that I've built a relationship up over the years. These are people that are having a positive impact on us to a point, especially within the consumer market, which is a key market for us. So, having grown up, and I literally had grown up in the rag trade in the fashion industry because that's my family background. So I knew the industry, and I guess I got sucked into it. And I thought osteopathy might be my route, but I still follow the fashion industry today. I still track it, right? But I really, as I say, I had the opportunity to look at something else. And, that was an important factor for me was, am I going to be bought into this? Is this something that's going to keep me interested and get me out of bed in the morning beyond just the job of recruitment itself?
Yeah, because I always say this, the actual job of a recruiter, if you're really, really good at recruitment, it's going to be quite a boring job. And I
Yeah.
say that to recruiters, like a lot of the clients I work with that are looking to scale and hire, I always say, let me meet them and I'm going to be very honest with them. And just because a lot of companies, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, will make the role of a recruitment consultant so sexy, and in your first year you'll earn 100 grand and all the rest of it. When I
Yeah.
sit down with recruiters, I sit there and say, your first year you'll be lucky to earn X amount unless you
Yeah.
work really hard. It's going to be really stressful. You're going to have to sacrifice your personal life. Don't get me wrong, there are the good stuff as well. If you have good months, you have your lunch clubs, presidents clubs and whatnot, but the day to day is actually quite monotonous. Like the actual role of recruitment is very, you find a job, you find a
Yeah.
candidate, you find a candidate, you find a job. It's quite boring. And the best recruiters I've interviewed, the best recruiters I've worked with, they just do the basics extremely well and don't overcomplicate it. And that was one
Yeah.
of my fundamental flaws, is as someone that is quite a typical ADHD of I want to do so many new and exciting things. I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to do a newsletter. And my
Yeah.
boss would sit there and be like, well, your mate over there is just
Yeah.
making X amount of calls and doing his e-shots and whatnot. You're trying to do all this fancy stuff, which is great,
Yeah.
but you just need to do the basics. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, being stuck in an office for 5 days a week and not going out for coffees, not going to exhibitions is boring for me. But the
Yeah.
best top billers were just doing those boring things. I wanted to do more exciting things. And look, that's kind of why I do what I do now, right? I'm constantly in new offices, constantly in front of new people and stuff like that. But one question I wanted to have for you then on that, because you talk about the market you're in is obviously strategy. You've grown your business to 100 plus people. That's a
Yeah.
lot of founders'
Yeah.
dream, is to get to that level and have multiple offices and stuff.
Yeah.
I've had a few people on the podcast talk about strategy, their BD strategy, their candidate attraction strategy, their growth, their exit strategy. Could you sort of maybe explain to us what your strategy was maybe early on,
Yeah.
and how you've implemented it, how you've executed it to then scale your business to this sort of level then?
Yeah. So I think the key to our success is that we've remained niche and specialist. And, to anyone looking to start a recruitment company, I would always, that would be my first point of reference in relation to how they should be thinking about their business. Not pretending to be everything to everyone, and really being very focused, I think, is critical to success. So the challenge from day one that I had was, well, how do there are two routes you can go when you start a company. One is you build a business with a view that, at some point you're going to want to exit. And so you want to create a business with a value that you can move on. Secondly, it could be a lifestyle business. So you get it to 10, 20 people and it turns over X amount each year and you pay yourself very nicely, but there's no real sort of exit plan in that regard. For me, from day one, it was always with a view that, look, at some point, I know I want to create something that will continue to grow, but without my direct involvement in it. So the challenge then was, how do we grow something, scale it, but stay niche and focused? And so we started focusing just on strategy. But over the years, we've evolved that, again, not to do differential in terms of, right, we've got strategy here and now we do legal, we do IT, we do HR, we do marketing. What we've done is we've broadened it so that actually we do strategy through to execution. And so strategy and transformation really underpins, the business we have today. And then we've then increased the service lines that we do that. So when I started the Barton Partnership, we just did strategy into industry and permanent recruitment. So one type of skill set into one industry, one service line. 18 years on, we serve multiple sectors and industries. across multiple locations and multiple service lines, but we're still very focused around the skill set and the toolkit of the candidates that we place. So these individuals typically are ex-consultants, not necessarily all the time, but these are people that can have a fundamental impact on what the business does, from strategy through to execution. So we placed chief transformation officers, chief digital data analytics, ESG sustainability, M&A, strategy. And so to the untrained eye, that would seem quite broad, but actually the characteristics and capability of the individual is very similar. And then we do that across private equity, across industry, financial services. We do that across professional services. We do that in different geographic locations. And now we have 3 service lines. So we have our permanent retained business, our independent consulting business, which is our interim business. And then we have our consulting solutions business, which is our fractional consulting arm. And so that's been critical to our success. And that now underpins the platform that we're building the business upon. So we've stayed very focused around capability. You know, we're not a Michael Page that has multiple different divisions that don't actually correlate. What we now have is one business globally where we've got 100 people talking the same language to the same individual. And that's a very powerful ecosystem. And that's a very powerful collaborative environment as well. You know, we're not divisions, we're not islands within a brand that actually do not correlate to one another. You know, we are, you know, one organization servicing the same type of profile, but into different industries.
That makes sense.
It's created a very positive and very collaborative environment globally, and a very unique platform for us to service our clients in that regard, because we've also then interlaced different service lines into that as well.
Yeah, that's something actually I wanted to pick up on. A lot of companies I work with, and I don't know if this is something that you have gone through with your current company or your previous companies, that because I say a very similar thing, right? And the people I've had on this podcast have said a similar thing around niching up, but not just saying you're specialist, actually really demonstrating through your day-to-day behavior, through your marketing, your branding, that this is the key specialty, you're the expertise in that area. But sometimes, say for example, you have a construction recruitment firm, right? And they have someone that does high-end residential, someone does commercial, someone that does general build. Some businesses, they don't have the cross-selling mindset or culture within the business. When I worked at a company called Projectus, we all did medical technology. Some would do cardiology, I done neurology, but there would be some cross-selling opportunities. And even if there wasn't like a financial incentive for me to then send a candidate to you or a client to you and you get a 10K deal and I don't get anything, we had a culture that was the business is the number one. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So how did you develop that culture?
From day one, I've been very, very stringent around making sure that there was no top drawing, as it's called, right?
Okay.
You know, and we're not an eat what you kill environment, you know, and so you know, we put the client and the customer first, you know, whether that's a candidate or an organization, and we put their needs first beyond, you know, the needs of the individual. And so from day one, it's been drummed into individuals that, you know, it is about the greater good. It is about the business. It's about great customer service. It's not about your own pocket. Now, clearly, you know, it is important to have the right incentives in place to motivate that behavior, but also it's something you've got to instill from day one. And I think, you know, the other aspect to our success hasn't been just that we've stayed very focused and niche, is that we've put great customer service at the center of what we do, you know, and not pretending to be everything to everyone and being disciplined around that. But then also creating that environment that really puts customer service. And I talk about this all the time. You know, customer service. I mean, everyone knows what great customer service feels like and has experienced great customer service. And equally, everyone knows what bad customer service feels like and how you feel and and the experience of going through that. And so, you know, we go with the less is more. We go with the specialist. The focus, but we go with great customer service, and that's how you build a brand, and that's how you build a business. And if you get those aspects right, you really have got the ingredients for success beyond anything else. And we can talk about the platform and we can talk about AI, but at the core of it, you know, if you've got the right focus and you can demonstrate your expertise around that, and you couple that with great customer service, then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point. So you've mentioned like really, really niche down, and even if your business is working within fashion, construction, whatever, as long as it's solely those types of roles, so you're quite a specialist in that, i.e., you know, strategy for yourself. Great customer service is another thing that you've mentioned. Is there anything else that you would say is like maybe even if we've reframe it to something that you had not done initially, but over the years have gone, actually, do you know what, let's implement that, and that really helped skyrocket the growth? Is there anything that pops to mind in that respect?
Our marketing strategy has definitely been an
Hmm.
accelerator for the business. The challenge with the market that we're in is that there's no medium for what we do. There's no magazine that covers our market. There's
Right.
no website. There's no social media following. I mean, we're not a Facebook, sort of Twitter, X, whatever.
Yeah.
We're not in that market to promote ourselves.
Hmm.
And so, very early on, it became very clear that, there was an opportunity or a gap in the market for us to really own that thought leadership piece. And so the marketing aspect of what we do has really accelerated the brand and the proposition globally. The web, but we host in-person events, networking events and conferences, breakfast roundtables, dinner roundtables, webinars, podcasts, salary surveys, thought leadership pieces, etc. For a company of our size in a niche market that we're in, we've got 103,000 followers now on LinkedIn, which is unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not a mass market, big recruitment business.
Yeah.
And so to have, that, and that's really down to the fact that we've really created a very powerful marketing capability to really elevate our brand and really position ourselves in our market as the true thought leaders in our space. And we look at every aspect of the challenges that are facing our organizations that we're supporting, from DE&I to compensation, to talent attraction, retention, etc. But we through our marketing now, that really has accelerated the business without doubt.
Yeah.
I think, for me, marketing is one of the critical aspects, I think, to continuing our journey in staying niche.
Yeah, I've just thought of an analogy, and I'm going to say this out loud. And it might sound really silly, but we were just talking about football, and
Go
it's
for it.
sometimes I get these things that come in my head. I was like, let's just say it. But I feel like in recruitment, marketing is like your number 10, like your creative midfielder, and
Yeah.
the sales reps are like your inverted wingers or your strikers, right? And I think sometimes you can build a business without marketing in the early days,
Yeah.
especially businesses that are short on cash flow and things like that.
Yeah.
But if you're not investing in marketing, I always say to businesses, like, the two fundamental things to invest in immediately, there's three, I would say. Marketing would probably be number one. If you're looking to hire many more consultants, then I would say training and tech stack would be number two or number three. I'm going to say training is probably number one because I'm biased. But
Yeah.
if you're not training your staff, then how are you going to have that great customer service? How are you not going to be transactional and deliver the message that you want to as a business?
Yeah.
But I think marketing is a huge one. Do you, as a business, kind of have a culture where your consultants will do personal branding as well? Or is it mainly just the business?
No, I
type
try
of,
to be honest with you. I'm actually, it's one of the things that I really try and drive into individuals. I want to create, and we've been pushing people to create an environment where people know the business for the individuals in the business and not because of the business itself, right?
Yeah.
That it's individual reputation and the fact that you work at the Barton Partnership as a secondary point. So what can you do? And we talk about LinkedIn, obviously, as probably one of the key instruments to being able to do that. In the same way that as an individual, you'd look at a film review or you would look at TripAdvisor if you were going away. You want to know more about where you're going.
Yeah.
What does your LinkedIn profile say about you? Why should someone engage you? It shouldn't be about the fact that you work at the Barton Partnership. What does your profile say about you?
Yeah.
And so that's really important for us. But to your point around sort of that infrastructure as well and that marketing, it isn't just marketing. It's I use the analogy all the time that you wouldn't build a house without a solid foundation.
Yeah.
And so from day one, I've been very fixed on, and I've got a lot of friends who run recruitment businesses that have done things in different ways, and they've been successful to a greater or lesser extent. But for me, I've always gone with the principle that I wanted to invest and make sure that we had the right infrastructure and the right platform to build the business upon. And so marketing was one of those aspects, operations, finance, that people capability. I've invested heavily to ensure that I've got what I would consider to be a best in class, and I call them, they hate it, but I call them mission control, right? But that central support capability has been also a critical factor in our success, because it's given us the foundation to build the business upon. And then training is a huge part of that, right? And I trained to become a recruitment trainer. I was a trainer at Asprey Marsden. Obviously, I do a lot of the training, or used to do a lot of the training at the Barton Partnership. We now have a onboard full-time developer trainer that works with the individuals as part of our HR and people capability function. So again, for a business of our size, we've taken that step to invest in someone that's really going to be working with the consultants to elevate them. And then, making sure that you've got the right platform, the infrastructure in place, the tools and the capability. Again, we've spared no expense over the years in making sure that there is no excuse for someone not being successful other than just not turning up.
Yeah.
And I know we'll talk about technology and AI, but again, that's been at the heart of our, strategy, is making sure we've got the right tools to enable people to become the best versions of themselves. And I think, again, that principle there has been a driving factor in the business.
Yeah, I think your analogy around the foundations, if you're going to build a house for a recruitment business, with the training, the marketing, etc., is so fundamental. And I've done, how many have I done now? About 40 plus episodes now, like 42 episodes, and a lot of which have been founders, whether they've been 100 employees, 200 employees, exited, or 1 or 2 employees. And one of the common things that people have said is the investment in training, and especially for me, I tend to work with very smaller recruitment businesses that the founder hasn't got enough time to sit down and coach and do the cool coaching and build materials to do a training session and stuff like that. And a lot of these companies, I'll say to them, once you get to a certain level, having a permanent L&D person is wise. When you're a smaller business, I found this sometimes when in my last company, when so many people were resigning, that as the L&D person, you sit there and you do your 5 coaching sessions, and for the rest of the day, you've set everyone up and you're sat there like, right, there's not really too much for me to do. So that's when I say to people, and I'm very, very honest, wear my heart on my sleeve. Sometimes I say to people, you're probably better off hiring someone permanently. Sometimes you're better off working with someone just once a month or once a fortnight. I think that's really important. I'm conscious of time. The other topic I wanted to talk about, which kind of goes in very, very nicely with what we just spoke about, is building a business in 2025. And a lot of people I speak to have set up in 2024, 2025. You mentioned when we first met about how, these days it's almost like a lot of recruitment companies or consultants are almost quite transactional since COVID. What would you say are some of the bigger differences in setting a recruitment business up nowadays in comparison to when you first set up yourself?
Well, I mean, I think that's really it. I think COVID changed the game in some positive ways, but I think it's also had a negative impact on the industry. To be clear, we are supporting human individuals, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are certain aspects to, there are certain areas of recruitment that don't necessarily require, that level of human interaction or a level of human interaction. Blue collar recruitment, potentially IT recruitment, where it's more about the capability and less about the individual. In my world, the personality and the key characteristics of the individuals are just as important as the skill set and the toolkit. And so, what became very clear after COVID. Now, COVID was great I say it was great. It enabled businesses to become more efficient, right, through the use of technology, like Zoom, Teams, and whatever else, right? Rather than sort of taking half an hour to get somewhere, meeting someone for a coffee, and then taking half an hour to come back, you could meet 4 people in the 2 hours that you've taken to meet one person. However, the big differential between that, though, and the disadvantage is the ability to build rapport, empathy, and trust. And I think that has become a lost art in the current day and age that we've got. We hire individuals into the business across all levels, but if we look at the individuals coming out of university, the graduates into researcher positions, we really do encourage them and push them to go out and meet people. Tread the pavement, press the flesh. It's not old school. It's how it should be done, right? It's all very well that we could have 4 calls in 1 hour and qualify candidates. But actually, you don't really get to know that individual. You don't understand who they are, what their drivers are, what their family background is, what's important for them. You're really just looking at their profile. You're making sure that actually they stack up to what they've said on their CV, and you're qualifying if they're interested in that job, and then you're moving on. You're not building relationships. And invariably, of course, candidates become clients. So, the purpose of meeting an individual is to build that relationship so that you are the first person that they want to get in touch with when they're looking for another job, when they've got a friend that's looking for another job, or when they're looking to hire themselves. That point of differential really will only come through the quality of the service that you've provided and the relationship that you've built with them. It's very difficult to do that virtually. Now, of course, there are going to be people overseas. You're not going to have the opportunity to travel necessarily. But if you're in the same town or location as the candidate you're dealing with, then why wouldn't you meet them? Why wouldn't you invest that time? And I've got to say, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that approach. Like, the strength of the relationships I have today with the clients that we deal with has purely come down to the human interaction I've had with them over the years. I think about what the business would look like now if I'd started it post-COVID with that philosophy. And I don't think we'd be as successful as we are today, because we wouldn't have that buy-in, that loyalty, and necessarily that reputation that we've established. Because again, that customer service aspect, you can't really demonstrate that through a screen.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think look, the Zoom calls, phone calls and stuff like that are fantastic for high volume stuff. And as I mentioned, I'm 42 episodes into this podcast now. And initially I said, I'm going to do them on Zoom because I need to focus on quantity. It's like when you first start out in recruitment, you want to focus on quantity, then mass calls, get in front of as many people as possible on a Zoom, for example. And then once you've kind of got to that level and you go, okay, cool, I've got the skills now, I kind of know what I'm doing, then you start working on quality. That's why I started to do a lot more face-to-face with people that are local to me or in London, etc., etc. But you kind of give me a flashback to my last job. I was in the office, there was like 60 people, and I just remember looking around thinking, I had access, as the L&D manager, I had access to all of the analytics. And I could see people were booking meetings, but every single day the office was stacked with consultants. So I went over to some of the directors and said, why the hell are people booking meetings and they're still in the office? Like, most of your clients are in London. What are we doing? The Salesforce building is in London. Like, no one's been out to an exhibition yet, or a conference, a roundtable. We're not doing anything. And the CEO was just like, well, that's a really stupid take, mate. You can do more calls in an hour than you can going on the tube to Victoria to meet a customer. And that was when it dawned on me that values wise and like ideology around the industry were just so far apart from one another. Because when I first got into permanent recruitment, my boss was like, I don't want to see you in the office 5 days a week. I want to see you in and out of this office, meeting people, coming back, saying, I just went for coffee with this client. I just went for dinner with this client. I went for beers with this client. I went to wine and dine these clients. And every single time, Nick, and I'm sure you all agree with this statement, whenever I came back from a meeting the next day, my boss would be like, do me a favor, call Nick. And I'm like, right, okay, I'll call him now. I want you to just tell me how he answers the phone to you in comparison to how he answered when you first spoke last week.
Exactly.
I give the guy a call. Hey, Nick, how's it going? Hey, Charles, how's it going, mate? You all right? Exactly. Oh, that beer was lovely, wasn't it? What a lovely sunset in St. Paul's. You're like, it's just all of a sudden, like what you said at the start about having friends who were candidates.
You're taking a relationship to another. Look, I have to, like, with I say the kids now, the guys that we've hired coming out of uni. When I was growing up in recruitment, I always made a point that one night every single week I would go out with someone, not with the view of getting smashed, right? It wasn't about that, but it could be a coffee, right? A glass of wine, a dinner. But one night every single week I would identify someone, whether it's a client or a candidate. I would go out and grab some food with them, or drink or dinner or whatever, and build a relationship with that individual. One night, right? Now, that doesn't take into account the breakfast I could do, the lunches, the coffees. Everyone that works here has an expense account. I encourage them to use it. Like, use it. Go out and engage the market. Now, look, be sensible about it. There's no point being out for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. There is still a delivery aspect to what you need to accomplish to be successful, right? But to your point, there's a difference between knowing someone and knowing someone, right? You know of someone, but do they know you? Yeah. And are they going to take your call, beyond anyone else? Are you going to be the first person they think about when they're looking to move job, recommend, or hire? And how do you put yourself in that position? And so I think it's a critical aspect. And I think it's become a lost art. And it's something that, when I go to, networking dinners for founders and CEOs, it's constantly being discussed.
Yeah.
And part of that is sort of, well, what's the right balance in terms of work life? What's the hybrid sort of solution? Now we're 3 and 2, and that's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, everyone will be in the office. So just that energy is important. But again, those are the critical days that we're saying, like, on the Wednesday and the Friday, you're virtual, fine. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, get out and meet people, right? Use that time, block out stuff. Don't just be so transactional.
Yeah, and when you said about it being a bit of a lost art, I studied NLP back in 2017, got my master prac in 2021, and a couple of the parts of the courses that I think resonate so well with me and for the job of a recruiter is the rapport building element. Like the first section of your NLP practitioner course is all about advanced levels of rapport. And I go through this with consultants when we talk about cold calls and stuff like that. I always say to people, like, book the meeting. When you get in front of someone, the mirroring and the matching, the pacing and leading is so crucial. And you're right, there's so many youngsters that they'll get in front of someone and say, for example, when I do a role play with them and I pretend to be a sales director or whatever, and typically the directors are quite direct, or the red personality for people who know that reference, and they'll say at the end of the role play, Nick, oh, you were quite rude, you were quite difficult. And I'm like, no. Yeah. You were being fluffy and you were talking loads. I was giving you one word answers and you made no effort to mirror my energy, to match my tonality. And that's an issue. Because if you're going to go out in front of an actual customer and go, hey mate, how was your weekend? They go, yep, it's good, thank you. Right, so let's get to business. And you go, oh, this guy's fucking rude, isn't he? Well, no, you just don't know how to mirror and match that personality. And that for me is why those face-to-face, especially as a recruiter, is so important. Because imagine you're going to go and get your candidate an interview with said hiring manager. You can then have that added layer of customer service, going back to your initial point of saying, well, when you go and meet with Joe Bloggs, FYI, he isn't much of a talk. He's quite direct. Some people think, it could be rude. He's not. He's actually really, really nice, high levels of empathy. He's just a very direct person. He likes a firm handshake. He likes eye contact. All this type of stuff as a recruiter.
You can adjust, and you can read the individual and adjust yourself to that person. As you say, mirroring is one of the key techniques that we teach around, again, how do you break down that initial barrier, that initial perception that you are just another recruiter? How do you move past that image and build that rapport, empathy, and trust? And that mirroring aspect is crucial to that.
Yeah, it's so powerful. You've also mentioned a few times about the tech stack, AI, automation. My last job when I was the L&D manager, we had things like Sourcewell. We had, I think it was Hyora, who I think I saw you're an investor and advisor for those guys. I think, is that the one with the CV formatting?
That's the CV format, yeah. So I've just come out of that because they sold now to Access Group, which was great. But no, I mean, there are so many products in the market.
Yeah.
I think for me, what's been our strategy around that? I think the critical aspect when I talk about the, technology and AI in a recruitment organization, I think the most critical aspect that I always say is keep it simple. It's very easy to build a very complicated tech stack, right?
Yeah.
The secret to success is the adoption of it, right?
Yeah.
There is no point having half a dozen different products that can do these wonderful things if less than 50% of the business is using them at any one time. So, the secret to technology and recruitment is less is more, and adoption is critical. And so if you can crack that, then you can start then building and interlacing in, because there are so many products, on a weekly basis, a new product will come out that will revolutionize something, whether it's Candidly or, something to do with your diary and time management, CV formatting, writing reports, etc. Market mapping, etc. There are so many different things, but I think how they are adopted and utilized is as important as what you've got. And so we've really ensured that we've kept it very minimal, very functional, and I think that's probably one of the biggest, again, changes to the industry going forward now, is that the definition of a big recruitment company now isn't defined by the number of bums on seats, because you could have 50 people generating the same revenue as a business with 100 people if they're effectively adopting the technology they've got at their disposal.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how that sort of that definition has really changed now, because, as I say, big recruitment companies were 150 to 200 people plus, right? Now big recruitment is defined by revenue, and revenue isn't going to be sort of, well, that big revenue means you've got a lot of people. Actually, it isn't. You could have a technology stack that is really, making an individual much more efficient. And we've really been focused on actually, well, how much time can we give the average recruiter back in their day through the adoption of technology? And how are we really making sure that it's embedded into their day-to-day, so they're not just using it when they feel they need to use it or when they remember to use it, but actually it becomes part and parcel of their engagement.
Yeah, well, this is what I was going to ask you, actually. Two questions. The first one was going to be, how, if a recruitment founder is listening to this right now and have invested loads in technology, automation, AI, etc., but they're struggling to get buy-in from consultants. I work with recruitment businesses, and this is probably my number one pet peeve as an external coach, is when the CRM isn't being utilized properly. And it's like, how do we track your data? How do we reverse engineer your goals if you're not even using your bloody CRM? That's first my one. But that question around, how can a recruitment founder get the buy-in from people to then execute and utilize the technology? And then the second question will be slightly different around, in your experience and with the boom of AI and automation, are there any tools, or what tools would you say, do you know what, recruitment businesses should jump on this because this has been a bit of a game changer?
I think, to your first question, I think you've got to look at it from a different perspective. If you have to try and convince a recruiter that using this technology is going to help you make more money, and you have to convince them around that, then you've got the wrong person in your business.
Okay.
And I think that, for me, that's always the crux of it. I mean, let's just be, why are you being stupid, right? I'm telling you, I've invested in a technology, in a platform that's going to help you make more money if you use it properly. Why wouldn't you use it properly? Why are you being stupid, right? If you're here to make money and I'm giving you something that's going to enable you to accelerate that, then you use it, right? I shouldn't have to sort of convince you around that. If you're driven because you want to improve the quality of your life, if you're building a deposit for a flat or a house, if you want to go on great holidays, if you want to turn left on a plane and not right, if you want to get to the end of the month and you're not wondering if you'll be able to afford a meal out, right? If you're here because you want to influence the quality of your life, and I'm giving you something that's going to absolutely accelerate that and help that, do I need to convince you of that? Because if I do, then I don't want you in the business. And so I think for me, that's really, it's got to be as black and white as that.
Yeah.
If the business owner is investing in technology that they know is going to have a fundamental impact on someone's success, that should be as much as it takes to convince someone to actually get on board with it. Now, recruiters are salespeople. They don't like administration. Technology these days, though, shouldn't be seen as administration. If you've set the fields up in the CRM system sensibly, and you've got the mandatory fields, then it's to the benefit of all. Then you know that the person next to you is doing exactly the same as you are, and therefore the quality of the information going in is at the standard that you would want it to go in at, and that you are putting it in at. And so I think that's an important point of reference as well.
Yeah. That, by the way, I'm just going to say it now for future Charles editing, that's a clip. That is a phenomenal clip, because I need to use that, because I go, like Nick, honestly, I go into businesses and I sit down, I go, so talk me how you're going to work this job that we've just pulled together. And they go, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll do a brand new project. I'm like, okay, all right, stop. Your database, you've got 20,000 plus people on the database. Are we not going to do a quick search? Most people don't really code it correctly on the database, so it's pointless. I just do a brand new search. Do you have save search? Do you have like previous shortlists on LinkedIn? Right. No. And now I'm just going to say what you said. Are you being stupid?
Yes.
Like, are you actually being stupid? Like, you're making your time like silly.
There is a fundamental difference between working hard and working smart, right?
Literally.
I love hard workers, but if you're not working smart, then you are stupid. Right. And so let's just be clear, right? The most successful recruiter is the one that's working smart and hard. Yeah. The £1 million plus billers are the smart, hard recruiters.
Yeah.
In my game, the £500,000 recruiters are working hard, but they're not working smart. Right. And so, what's that? Look at that differential. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. 100%.
And then in terms of your other question, because I'm conscious of the time, there's always something. And I think that I can't give a definitive answer of you've got to use this piece of technology. I think anything that gives time back and make someone more efficient. So Hire Aura was a fantastic and is a fantastic product.
Yeah.
Right. Not just from the point of formatting CVs, but report writing aspect. Especially in a search business where you've got to present a candidate, not just the CV, but you would write a report.
Yeah.
With the use of AI and ChatGPT now, there is an opportunity to dramatically reduce the amount of time that you would invest in creating that report. So again, how much, with any technology that we look at is, okay, firstly, is it essential or nice to have, right?
Yeah.
Because
Good question.
80% of the technology out there will definitely fall into the nice to have, right? What is it essentially going to do? What is it going to give me back in terms of time? How is it going to make me more efficient as a recruiter? And how is it going to help me generate more money? And if you can answer those questions effectively, then it's going to be the right technology for your business and your market. But I think that's the important differential. There isn't going to be a one shoe fit all. It's going to be, what market are you serving? In what location? What level of volume are we talking about? Is it search? Is it interim? Is it contingent? Is it consulting? And then align the technology to suit that proposition.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. I think for me, some of the best tech stacks that I've started to use are the AI note-taking stuff, because again, as a recruiter, I've been in this industry for 10 plus years. It's the only job I've really had. It's the devil to me. I absolutely hate admin. So if I can get AI
I think the one universal piece of product that we're looking to roll out that some people are already using in the business is Copilot. Yeah. I think Copilot, which interlinks with Teams, so then it does dictate and take notes, and then seamlessly puts that call into the system. Again, brilliant, right? Again,
game changer.
And it's all about minutes back, right? It's all about, this is going to save me 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. But the cumulative of that, if that's an hour to 2 hours back in your day, think about how many phone calls that is, or how many coffees that is. Yeah. But it gives you more opportunity to engage your market. And that's what the win is now. It's about how many minutes can I get back in my day through the adoption of technology so that I can do what I really enjoy doing, which is engaging my market.
100%. I look back, Nick, when I was a recruiter and my manager would have a go at me because every day at 5 I would do admin for an hour because I used to write my notes in my notebook. It's just silly. It's just very, very silly. But anyway, look, conscious of time, question I finish every episode with is, following today's episode, how can people in this industry get 1% better?
Just get out and meet people, build those relationships. I can't stress it enough. It's not old school. It is the main school of recruitment, which is, we work in a human industry. It's about building relationships. Get away from your screen, get out and meet people, look to understand, ask questions, engage your market, build your brand through human connection and not just through, Teams, Zoom or via your phone necessarily. So for me, that 1% is that press the flesh, get out there, tread the pavement, see what's going on in the real world and not just from behind a screen.
Perfect. I've actually not had that answer before, weirdly, in nearly half a century of episodes. That's a phenomenal answer. And
there you go.
I buy into that like so much as someone that loves the face-to-face stuff. But look, I'm really conscious of time. Nick, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really enjoyed this. You've
really
got so much value. And I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from what you've said. In terms of for people to reach out to you, what would be the best avenue if they do want to?
LinkedIn, email me, nicholas.barton@thebartonpartnership.com.
Wonderful. Cool. I'll put all your details at the below of this. Again, thank you so much for your time, and until next time.
Thanks, Charles.